The morning sun cuts through salt spray as Lieutenant Ichiro Nakamura adjusts his leather flight goggles, the Pacific stretching endlessly below his Aichi D-3A Val dive bomber. January 5th, 1943. The cockpit smells of aviation fuel and his own nervous sweat, despite the confidence burning in his chest. At 23, he's already a veteran of Pearl Harbor and the Coral Sea, a samurai of the sky who's sent 3 American ships to the ocean floor. Formation tight crackles through his radio. 3 other Vals slice through the crystal morning air beside him, their 250-kilogram bombs hanging like mechanical death beneath their bellies. Below, the USS Helena cuts through the Guadalcanal waters, her gray hull gleaming like a knife blade in the sunlight. Nakamura's fingers dance over his controls with practiced precision. 70-degree dive angle. Pull out at 1,500 feet. Just like training at Kasumigara Naval Air Base, except this time American sailors will die. His bomb sight crosshairs settle on Helena's forward gun turrets, the perfect target. One direct hit will cripple her anti-aircraft defenses, leaving her helpless for his wingmen. But something feels different this morning. Helena's gunners aren't scrambling in panic like usual. Through his binoculars, Nakamura watches them moving with unusual calm, loading shells that look identical to standard ammunition but somehow feel wrong. The ship's 5-inch guns track his formation with mechanical precision, waiting, not desperately searching the sky, but waiting with the patience of predators who know their prey is already trapped. What Nakamura cannot see, what no Japanese pilot could possibly imagine, is that each shell being loaded into Helena's guns contains 130 miniaturized electronic components, a complete radio transmitter and receiver crammed into a space smaller than a light bulb. 2 years of impossible engineering by Dr. Merle Tuve's team at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, working 18-hour days to create ammunition that can kill without ever touching its target, the Proximity Fuse, America's most closely guarded secret alongside radar and the atomic bomb. As Nakamura rolls into his attack dive, bomb bay doors opening with mechanical precision, he has no idea he's about to witness the birth of modern warfare. In 60 seconds, his world of calculated dive angles and manual bomb releases will collide with technology that seems to violate the laws of physics themselves. Helena's guns elevate smoothly, tracking the incoming Vals with electronic precision. The shells, loaded in their breeches, cost $18 each, more than a month's pay for an American soldier, versus $1.50 for regular ammunition. Each round represents thousands of hours of scientific breakthrough, compressed into 5 inches of revolutionary death. The question hanging in the salt air above the Pacific isn't whether Nakamura will hit his target. The question is whether traditional warfare can survive what's about to happen when his centuries-old dive bombing tactics meet America's impossible technology. Can you imagine being the first pilot to face weapons that explode in empty air? 3,000 miles away, in a cramped Baltimore laboratory that smells of solder and desperation, Doctor. Merle Tuve stares at the telegram in his hands. Funny fuse departing tomorrow. Pray it works. His team of 700 scientists has just sent their life's work into combat, a device so revolutionary that even they're not entirely sure it will function under actual battle conditions. The laboratory walls are covered with schematics that look like electronic hieroglyphics, radio circuits small enough to fit inside artillery shells, vacuum tubes tiny enough to survive the crushing G-forces of cannon fire, technology that pushes 1940s engineering beyond every known limit. Tuve's motto hangs above his desk. I don't want any damn fool to save money. I only want him to save time. Time. The one thing America doesn't have as Japanese kamikaze attacks intensify across the Pacific. Back aboard Helena, Lieutenant Commander Red Cochran cradles one of the proximity shells like a newborn baby. The metal casing feels identical to standard ammunition, but inside lurks something that defies everything he knows about naval warfare. The shell contains a miniature radar system, a complete transmitter that will broadcast radio waves, detect any aircraft within 70 feet, and detonate automatically. "Sir," whispers Seaman Johnson, "how do we know these things actually work?" Cochrane's weathered hands trace the shell's smooth surface. "Son, if they don't work, we're about to become very dead heroes." Meanwhile, Nakamura's formation approaches through morning sky that tastes of salt and victory. His wingman, Lieutenant Kenji Hayashi, flies so close their wingtips nearly touch, a dance of precision learned through thousands of training hours. Both pilots carry photographs of their families tucked inside their flight suits, alongside their final letters home. Not because they expect to die, but because dying honorably for the Emperor transforms death into something sacred. "Target bearing 090, Nakamura reports, his voice steady despite his racing heartbeat. Helena grows larger in his windscreen, her anti-aircraft guns swiveling to track his approach. Standard defensive pattern. Predictable. American gunners always panic when facing determined dive bomber attacks, spraying ammunition wildly, hoping for lucky hits that rarely come. Except today, Helena's gunners aren't panicking. Chief Petty Officer Murphy has been in 3 major naval battles, watched dozens of Japanese aircraft bore in through curtains of anti-aircraft fire. He knows the desperate mathematics of aerial combat. Thousands of shells fired, precious few hits achieved. American gunners survive through sheer volume of fire, hoping random explosions will catch enemy aircraft. But these new shells promise something impossible. Precision without accuracy. Kills without contact. "Range 8,000 yards in closing," reports the gun director. Murphy's crew loads the proximity shells with movements practiced until they become muscle memory. Each man knows that experimental ammunition sometimes fails catastrophically, turning their own guns into bombs. They're betting their lives on technology they don't understand, created by scientists they'll never meet. In his diving cockpit, Nakamura begins his final approach, the familiar ritual of combat: throttle adjustments, altitude calculations, target alignment flows through his consciousness like meditation. At 4,000 feet, he pushes his stick forward, beginning the screaming dive that has terrorized American ships for 18 months. Helena's superstructure fills his bomb sight. Perfect angle, perfect speed, perfect positioning for a kill that will add another victory flag to his aircraft. Behind him, his 3 wingmen follow in precise formation. 4 aircraft, 4 bombs. Enough concentrated explosive power to cripple any American cruiser and send her to the bottom with all hands. What none of them realize is that they're flying into the world's first test of automated air defense. Each proximity shell waiting in Helena's guns contains radio circuits that will measure distance to aircraft with electronic precision impossible for human gunners. No more guessing, no more hoping, no more relying on luck and volume of fire. Just mathematical certainty delivered at 2,600 feet per second. Nakamura's altimeter spins downward. 3,000 feet. 2,500 feet. 2,000 feet. Helena's details sharpen through his windscreen. Individual sailors visible on her decks. Anti-aircraft guns tracking his approach with mechanical smoothness. Everything proceeding exactly according to his training and experience. At 1,800 feet, Helena's 5-inch guns fire. Not the usual desperate barrage of dozens of shells, but 4 precise shots, measured, calculated, almost casual in their confidence. Nakamura watches the muzzle flashes bloom from Helena's gun mounts, sees the shells climbing toward his formation in graceful arcs that seem too slow, too few to pose any real threat. Standard American gunnery would put those shells hundreds of yards away from his aircraft. Even excellent shooting might place explosions within 200 feet, close enough to be frightening, but harmless unless incredibly lucky. These shells are different. As the first proximity round climbs toward Lieutenant Hayashi's aircraft, its internal radio transmitter begins broadcasting electromagnetic waves at 200 megacycles per second. The returning echoes bounce off Hayashi's aluminum fuselage, feeding data to electronic circuits smaller than a matchbox. Distance calculations occur in milliseconds: 100 feet, 80 feet, 70 feet. At exactly 65 feet from Hayashi's cockpit, the shell detonates. What happens when 4 centuries of aerial combat tactics meet technology that seems to violate the laws of physics? The explosion blooms in empty air like a deadly flower. Nakamura's world erupts into chaos as Lieutenant Hayashi's VAL simply disintegrates 50 feet away from where the American shell detonated. Not a direct hit. The shell never touched Hayashi's aircraft, but a sphere of white-hot shrapnel expanding at supersonic speed, shredding aluminum and flesh with mathematical precision. "Masaka!" Nakamura screams into his radio. "Impossible!" Hayashi's fighter transforms from graceful predator to burning wreckage in the space between heartbeats. Flaming pieces of wing and fuselage tumble past Nakamura's cockpit, trailing smoke and the smell of aviation fuel and worse things. The shell exploded in empty air, 70 feet from the nearest aircraft, yet killed with surgical efficiency. His hands shake on the control stick. In 18 months of combat, Nakamura has watched American anti-aircraft fire miss by hundreds of yards. Shells that explode harmlessly in the distance, creating pretty puffs of black smoke that rarely threaten experienced pilots. The mathematics of aerial warfare have always favored the attacker. Small, fast targets versus large, clumsy shells that must score direct hits to kill. But this shell never tried to hit anything. "Control to all aircraft," crackles through his headset. "Report Hayashi's status." Before Nakamura can respond, the second proximity shell detonates 60 feet from Lieutenant Sato's aircraft. Another impossible explosion in empty air. Another VAL erupting into flames and metal fragments. Sato's final radio transmission cuts off mid-scream as his fighter cartwheels into the Pacific, trailing fire and disbelief. Aboard Helena, Chief Petty Officer Murphy stares through his binoculars in stunned silence. "Jesus Christ," he whispers. "Did we hit them or not?" The question hangs in the salt air because the answer defies everything Murphy knows about naval gunnery. His shells exploded nowhere near the Japanese aircraft, yet 2 planes burn on the ocean surface below. Impossible near misses that somehow achieved perfect kills. 2 targets down, reports the gun director, his voice tight with amazement. Shells detonated at approximately 70 feet from target aircraft. 70 feet? Murphy's weathered hands grip his binoculars tighter. "Son, shells don't kill at 70 feet unless they're the size of naval artillery." But the burning wreckage below tells a different story. Nakamura pulls out of his dive violently, abandoning his attack run as the third proximity shell climbs toward his position. His bomb releases early, a 250-kilogram explosive tumbling harmlessly into the ocean 500 yards from Helena's hull. Training and discipline collapse before the impossible reality unfolding around him. American shells that kill without touching their target's technology that turns the fundamental mathematics of aerial combat into meaningless calculations. The third shell detonates precisely 68 feet from Nakamura's starboard wing. Shrapnel tears through his cockpit canopy like metallic rain. Hot fragments slice across his left shoulder, drawing blood that spatters across his instrument panel. His engine coughs as metal fragments puncture cooling lines, temperature gauges climbing into red danger zones. But he's alive. Barely. Because the shell's targeting system calculated his aircraft's position with electronic precision but couldn't account for his violent evasive maneuver. All aircraft, withdraw immediately, Nakamura shouts into his radio. Repeat, withdraw. American ships have devil ammunition that explodes in air. His surviving wingman, Lieutenant Tanaka, needs no encouragement. Banking hard to starboard, trailing smoke from proximity fragments that peppered his fuselage, Tanaka's valve claws for altitude and distance from Helena's impossible guns. Below them, Helena's crew erupts in celebration. Gunner's mate, First Class Rodriguez, pounds Murphy's back with enthusiasm. Chief, did you see that? 2 kills with 4 shots. 4 goddamn shots. But Murphy's celebration dies as the implications hit him. If American ships can kill aircraft with shells that don't need direct hits, every assumption about naval air defense must be rewritten. The desperate mathematics that governed Pacific warfare, dozens of guns firing thousands of shells to achieve single kills, has just become obsolete. Get me the captain, Murphy orders, his voice hoarse with amazement. He needs to know what just happened here. Captain Charles Cecil holds the preliminary action report with trembling hands. 2 confirmed aircraft kills achieved with 4 proximity shells. Standard ammunition would have required hundreds of rounds for similar results, if any results at all. The numbers don't make sense according to everything the U.S. Navy knows about anti-aircraft warfare. Chief Murphy, Cecil's voice carries across Helena's bridge, are you telling me our shells exploded 70 feet from enemy aircraft and still achieved kills? Yes, sir. Like they had some kind of invisible reach. Shells that somehow knew exactly where the Japs were flying. What Captain Cecil cannot know, what no one aboard Helena realizes, is that they've just witnessed the birth of modern automated warfare. Dr. Tuve's proximity fuse represents more than revolutionary ammunition. It's the first glimpse of weapons that think electronically, calculate mathematically, and kill with precision impossible for human operators. Miles above the Pacific, Nakamura struggles to maintain consciousness as his damaged Val limps toward Japanese-held airspace. His radio crackles with frantic reports from other formations encountering similar, impossible American technology. Shells exploding in empty air around. Our aircraft. 2 fighters lost to near-miss detonations. Americans using phantom ammunition that kills without contact. Each report confirms Nakamura's terrifying realization. Traditional dive-bombing tactics have become suicide missions overnight. Aircraft that survive by exploiting American gunnery limitations now face weapons with no limitations except the speed of radio waves themselves. His instrument panel flickers as damaged electrical systems fail one by one. Oil pressure dropping. Coolant temperature climbing past red lines. Engine cylinders misfiring from shrapnel damage. But Nakamura forces his dying aircraft toward home base, driven by desperate need to report what he's witnessed. At Henderson Field, Japanese intelligence officers listen to Nakamura's debriefing with expressions ranging from skepticism to horror. Shells that explode in empty air, impossible American accuracy achieved without direct hits, technology that transforms near misses into perfect kills. Lieutenant, interrupts Commander Fujiwara, you're claiming American gunners can detonate shells at precise distances from aircraft without physical contact? Nakamura's bandaged shoulder throbs as he leans forward. Sir, I watched it happen. Hayashi's aircraft destroyed by a shell that exploded 50 feet away. Sato killed by another near-miss detonation. Our traditional tactics are useless against this technology. Silence fills the briefing room as the implications sink in. If American ships possess ammunition that kills through proximity rather than direct impact, Japanese air attacks must evolve or face annihilation. The mathematical advantages that made dive bombing effective Small target profiles, high-speed approaches, brief exposure windows become meaningless against weapons that create spheres of destruction in three-dimensional space. What are your recommendations, Lieutenant? Nakamura stares at the battle-damaged photographs spread across the briefing table. Shrapnel patterns that make no sense. Kill mechanisms that defy traditional warfare logic. Evidence of American technology that seems decades ahead of anything Imperial Japan possesses. Sir, he says quietly, we must assume American ships can kill any aircraft approaching within conventional attack parameters. Traditional dive bombing and torpedo runs have become impossible. If we continue attacking American vessels with current tactics, we will lose every aircraft we send. How do you fight an enemy whose weapons have evolved beyond the fundamental rules of warfare itself? 6 months later, Lieutenant Ichiro Nakamura receives orders that confirm his worst fears. The Imperial Navy is abandoning conventional air attacks entirely, implementing a desperate new strategy born from their encounters with impossible American technology, kamikaze missions. Suicide attacks designed to overwhelm proximity fuses through sheer numbers and willingness to die. The Americans' Devil ammunition cannot stop aircraft determined to crash into their ships, explains Commander Fujiwara during the final briefing. Their shells require time to calculate distance and detonate. We will deny them that time through ultimate sacrifice. Nakamura's hands tremble as he reads his final orders. Not because he fears death. Samurai tradition has prepared him for that honor, but because he understands the terrible mathematics behind Japan's decision. American technology has made conventional tactics so obsolete that suicide becomes the only remaining tactical option. The proximity fuse has transformed aerial warfare from skill-based combat into a mathematical death sentence. Meanwhile, at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, Dr. Merle Tuve examines battle reports with satisfaction tempered by exhaustion. Helena's success represents validation of 2 years spent miniaturizing radio technology, solving impossible engineering challenges, and risking everything on revolutionary concepts that barely existed in science fiction. Congratulations, Doctor. Admiral William Parsons shakes Tuve's hand with genuine reverence. Your fuse has just changed naval warfare forever. The statistics tell an incredible story. By 1945, proximity fuses account for 51% of all naval aircraft kills despite comprising only 25% of ammunition used. Night combat effectiveness increases by 370%. American ship losses to air attack drop dramatically as Japanese pilots face weapons that seem to violate the laws of physics. But Tuve's triumph carries haunting implications. His laboratory has created technology so effective that desperate enemies choose suicide over conventional tactics. Every proximity fusee success pushes Japan deeper into kamikaze desperation, intensifying a Pacific War that statistics say should be ending. Doctor, asks a young engineer, do you think the Japanese will adapt to our technology? Tuve stares at reconnaissance photographs showing Japanese aircraft factories retooling for suicide missions. Conventional fighters stripped of armor and defensive weapons, modified to carry maximum explosive payloads for one-way missions. An entire air force rebuilt around accepting certain death as tactical doctrine. They're adapting, he says quietly, just not in ways we wanted. Post-war interviews with surviving Japanese pilots reveal the psychological impact of proximity fuse encounters. Captain Saburo Sakai, Japan's leading ace, describes the technology's effect on pilot morale. We called them phantom shells, ammunition that killed through invisible reach. Fighting Americans became like fighting ghosts. You could see their weapons, but they killed you from distances that should have been safe. The proximity fuse principle powers modern warfare systems that would amaze even Dr. Tuve's revolutionary team. Patriot missile defense systems, naval close-in weapons systems, smart artillery rounds that adjust their own trajectories, air-to-air missiles that detonate near targets rather than requiring direct impact. Every guided weapon system traces its ancestry to those first impossible explosions above USS Helena. Today's military technology operates on the same fundamental breakthrough: sensors that measure distance electronically, computers that calculate optimal detonation timing, and weapons that kill through mathematical precision rather than human skill. The proximity fuse represented humanity's first step toward automated warfare, machines making kill decisions faster than human reflexes can respond. Lieutenant Nakamura never lived to see modern smart weapons. He died October 25, 1944, crashing his damaged Zero into USS St. Low during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, his final radio transmission, preserved in American records, carries haunting recognition of technology's triumph over tradition. "Tell my family I died fighting the future itself." But his sacrifice illuminated a lesson that echoes through every subsequent military conflict. Technological breakthrough can transform warfare overnight, making centuries of tactical knowledge obsolete in the space between heartbeats. Nations that fail to innovate don't just lose battles, they face extinction. The proximity fuse saved thousands of American sailors' lives by making air attacks suicidal rather than merely dangerous. It shortened World War II by months, possibly years, reducing casualties on all sides through technological superiority that made continued resistance mathematically impossible. Yet it also demonstrated technology's darkest capability, pushing desperate enemies toward increasingly extreme tactics. When conventional warfare becomes impossible, human creativity turns toward unconventional horror. Proximity fuses created kamikaze attacks. Smart bombs inspire improvised explosive devices. Every defensive breakthrough generates offensive innovations designed to neutralize technological advantages. The next time you read about military technology development, remember Lieutenant Nakamura staring at shells exploding in empty air, realizing his world of predictable tactics had collided with humanity's leap into electronic warfare. What other impossible technologies are being developed in secret laboratories today, waiting to revolutionize tomorrow's conflicts in ways we cannot yet imagine?